Hey guys, so Halloween is right around the corner, so why don't we create maybe a couple props? Well, today I'll just do one, but let's do something along the theme of Halloween. I think maybe it would be fun to make something like maybe like a stylized candle and see where that takes us. So how would you create a stylized, candle in zBrush? Well, let's think about this. So I think to get started, what we should do is let's append a cylinder. All right, and I'm just gonna hide my sphere. And so I have this cylinder, right? And if you look at the cylinder, this is what it looks like. How do we turn this into a candle, right? So we can maybe sculpt on it. Well, obviously we need to subdivide it. So currently, if you go to geometry, you can see that there's no subdivision level, right? So if we just press Control D, so let me press it. Right now I'm at 31,000 points if I subdivide it 4 times. Now, question, so how do you know how many times to subdivide it in order for this to be useful? Well, the answer is really simple, right? So if you wanted to sculpt something on it, and for example, if we want the wax kind of melting off the candle, right? We would probably want to use masking for that. So if you press Control and start dragging on your candle, you can see that the current resolution is not high enough for us to begin to attempt to maybe draw something that looks like it's melting wax, right? So that's your answer. The answer is 4 subdivision currently at this point is not enough. So I'm gonna hold on Control and drag to get rid of my masking. And now if I press Control D one more time, you can see that takes me to level 5. And now I have 126,000 points. And let's test this again and see if maybe that's enough, right? You can see that this gives us much higher resolution, and maybe that could work. So let's go with this. So I'm gonna leave it on subdivision level 5. And honestly, we can always think about turning it into a game asset or low poly model afterwards, but initially let's just only focus on the high res sculpting. So I'm going to delete the lower. I don't even need it, right? And what I'm going to do next is using the standard brush. I'm going to make my brush kind of small, and I'm just going to go around the candle and draw, holding on the Control key, I'm just going to draw kind of these pieces that are maybe kind of melting off. And I'm not even going to have my symmetry on because I do want it to be somewhat organic, right? And let's just very quickly go around the entire candle and just create something that looks like it's melting. All right, excellent. I think this will work great for us. Another thing we could do, once you go around and create a border, let's make our brush just a little bit larger, and maybe let's just also include some of the stuff inside as well, just so it feels like maybe it grabs some of the edges too. So I'm just gonna go all the way around and select some of this, all of this stuff here too, right? Okay, very nice. And another thing we can do is we could at this point press this in if we wanted to, but let's just actually wait to do this. All right, so once you are done with your masking and you feel like this is a good selection for maybe something that is melting off the candle, let's go to subtools and let's go to extract. And one thing we could do is let's turn our smoothness all the way up, and for thickness, how about 0.17 instead? And I think that gives us a pretty good thickness. So I'm gonna go ahead and do accept. Now, if I hold on Control and drag, I can clear that out. And the next thing I want to do is I definitely want to smooth out some of these sharp edges that you're seeing, right? So there's a few ways we can do this. Probably the best way is just to Z-remesh it, right? So let's just Z-remesh this, and 128 seems a little bit too low. So I'm going to switch it to maybe around 300 and do a Dynamesh. Once you do that, you can see what that looks like. This gives us, I think, enough resolution to play with. Let's go ahead and scroll down to deformation. And under polish, let's close our circle. And closing circle, if you want to press Control key and hover over polish, it's going to tell you what that does, right? So the open circle will apply a polish that will maintain the overall form of the tool. And the closed circle will apply a polish that will smooth out the tool without maintaining the volume. And that's essentially what we want, because we want to get rid of these sharp edges that were created when we were masking. So we don't want to maintain this shape. So for that, I'm gonna close the circle and let's just polish this all the way 100%. And you can see how that's smoothing it out, right? And we can even do it twice to really make it look like it's more of a waxy kind of situation going on, right? Very nice. So the other thing we could do is let's now kind of blend this wax with the candle, so it's one mesh and it's not two separate layers. But before we do that, maybe one of the things we can take advantage of is maybe the inflate brush. So the inflate brush is really cool because you can go to the bottom of these kind of blobs and just kind of inflate them up. And you can see how it's going to add even more stylized, interesting look to kind of the melting wax, right? So let's go ahead and do that real quick. Just go all the way around and just kind of blob these up even more. All right, so I'm gonna do that really quick on my end. And that's cool. If you wanted to, you can even take a little time and maybe, you know, make the top surface to be a little blobby as well and not so even. And we can take the move brush later and mess this up even more. But the more I do it, the more you can see how it's starting to look more of like a candle. All right, so before, another thing you can do, keep in mind on the inflate, instead of using add, you can also do subtract. So to use that, if your current selection is on the brush is set to add, you can hold on the Alt key, and you can, holding down the Alt key, you can make some of these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold on the Alt key to kind of make it thinner, and then hold on the Shift key to smooth this out. So it's a combination of pressing Alt and smooth. Gives you a really nice effect. And then if you don't hold on the Alt key, obviously it's going to inflate it, right? So just using the inflate, deflate, and smoothness give you a lot of artistic options here to create something very interesting. All right, so once you're done and you're happy with it, the next thing we could do is let's go back to our cylinder layer, and we could just click on our layers here, or you can hold on the Alt key and just tap on the mesh, and that will select the layer as well. Now, one interesting thing is our if I hide my wax layer, you can see that our selection is still selected on the candle. Let's make sure that we do Control and drag to clear it, right? We don't want to see that. We don't want to have that mess us up. The other thing we could do is let's go ahead and select our candle, and maybe let's go to something like the move brush. Click on settings. Let's click on taper, and let's figure out if we want to taper out or kind of flare out the bottom of the candle. So it's just a little more interesting, so it's not perfectly straight, right? That's an option. We could do that. The other thing we could do, let's commit by saying accept. Another thing we can do, of course, is do something like the move brush. And in the active symmetry, if I turn on my radial symmetry, I can switch this to Z, for example, or not Z, Y, right? And you can see how that's going to affect the mesh all the way around. So now if I press this in, for example, you can see that it's affecting the entire candle, right? All the way around, 360, which is really cool. So that's an option. All right, very nice. So now let's go ahead and just maybe infuse both of these layers into one, right? So we know that this one is currently a Dynamesh and the resolution for it is 304. So let's do the same thing with this guy. I'm gonna go to my candle layer, turn my resolution to about the same, 304. It doesn't need to be exact number, but about. And I'm gonna do a Dynamesh. So now they're both Dynamesh, which means if I merge them down, right? And say okay, it's going to merge them into one layer. And check this out, you can see currently they're separate, right? You can see that there's clearly a separation, but if I hold on Control and drag, you can see that they are now infused together, making it, giving us kind of a solid chunk instead of two pieces, right? Which also means, let's go ahead and do, I'm going to jump out of the symmetry here, and now I can do my polish just like I did before. And that will, you know, smooth out all of those connection pieces. I can also, if you have any kind of weirdness like this, because this is now a Dynamesh, we can easily clean this up by holding down the Shift key and just very quickly go around and get rid of anything that's kind of blobby and weird, right? Just takes a little time. We can do that. So if you hold down the Shift key, you can see you can change the Z intensity. I'm currently set to 100. Which is great. All right, very nice. This to me already looks a lot like a candle. Another thing we can do is let's grab our move brush, make it kind of large, and let's just press this whole middle in, right? I'm just gonna press it in, and I would even suggest if you are, if you want to, just maybe push these sides out a little. And it's totally fine if it's not even. I think it's actually even better, right? Save something like that. Very cool. Now my material by default is currently set to skin shader 4. We could switch it to maybe something else that maybe allows us to see the candle a little better. And a lot of times if you switch between materials, this is really interesting too. You can see imperfections in your sculpting. So again, you can see that I have these blobs on the bottom still, you know, these lines from subdividing our cylinder, so I can quickly fix that. I can see that there's some of them here as well, right? So I can fix that. So it's a very powerful technique to switch between your materials to catch any imperfections in your sculpting. Keep that in mind, it's really useful. All right, very fun. So next, let's create maybe a little, just a kind of a cartoony flame. So to do that, I'm gonna just maybe, let's figure out what do we want to use. Let's just use a sphere, but I just remembered I actually have a sphere. So let's just use a sphere. If you don't have a sphere here, just append one. Just append another sphere. And let's maybe, you know, position it, maybe make it a little smaller. Let's turn it into Dynamesh. So I'm going to turn it into Dynamesh by just control dragging. And I think 240 is fine, right? And I'm going to grab my move brush and let's just maybe kind of sculpt this into what we think the flame might be. Like a stylized cartoony flame. Now keep in mind, check this out. So this is currently, the move brush is not going to allow me to kind of point, you know, drag a point out. So there's a few different ways we can do this. If you want to do like a sharp end, we can switch to something like a snake brush. So if I press S, I can take a snake hook and I can, you know, do something like that. Ooh, turn off my active symmetry. I could do something like that, which is cool. And that's an option, right? Now, another thing you could do if you don't want to use a snake brush, or if you want to learn about another option, you can just grab your move brush and turn on AccuCurve. Now, AccuCurve is located in brush curve, which means if you go to brush, scroll down to curve, you can see there's a button called AccuCurve. But that's what that's going to do is it will allow you to pinch your move brush and create very sharp corners. which is actually pretty perfect for this situation here with the flame, right? Let's see, what else can we do? Let's grab our move brush. Another thing you can do maybe to play with the flame is do something like a spiral, which is also fun. You can create kind of a flamey look. Now the spiral, check this out, if you drag it once, it will go to the right, right? If you hold on the Alt key, it will reverse the other way, right? Which is really interesting. And maybe we can take advantage of that and just kind of create something unique. Then we can use our move brush to kind of move it around. And now I do want to turn off my active curve if I do this, but we could just maybe move it around holding down the Shift key. Just do something like that. We can also maybe change the size of it. All right. Now another thing we can do is, let's say we want to have a little wick coming out from kind of the fire, right? So what would be easiest way to kind of get underneath? And we can of course append another cylinder. That would be correct as well. But let's just have fun. Another thing we can do is we can solo this out. And we could grab our standard brush, go on the bottom of this piece, make our brush really small, hold down the Control key and just do something like this, right? Then do Control click to reverse the masking, grab our move brush and just drag this down. Then do Control and drag. Let's do Control and drag again to re-dynamesh this. And let's switch to our standard brush, and maybe holding down the Shift key can just smooth this out a little, right? All right, very nice. Let's jump out of the solo mode and take a look what we got. Very nice. I'm feeling like I made the bottom of this a little too weak. So maybe it can actually be a little thicker on the bottom. Right? And of course I can also move it down. Very cool. Again, if I hold on the Alt key, I can tap, grab something like the inflate, holding down the Alt key, I can maybe push this in. I can do that. And there you go. So very quickly you can create kind of a stylized looking candle. Another thing we can do is maybe let's put the candle on something, right? So to do that, I'm just gonna append let's append another cylinder. And we could just scale this up, make this something like this. Very cool. If we wanted to have fun with booleans, why don't we do that? Let's duplicate this and let's take the inner part and kind of drag it in and up. So we have something like that. And let's turn this bottom part, this part here, into a, let's see, into like a subtraction. So that would be this piece here. And let's turn on our live boolean so we can see how that's looking. So we can kind of just press this in just like this, right? And we do need to do a start. Now a start, you can see it's going to tell ZBrush that I'm only subtracting the bottom piece. If you don't do that, you can see that it's also cutting the candle, right? So I'm going to press start, so I'm going to tell ZBrush, hey, only use these two pieces to do the live booleans, right? Which is what we want. We can control maybe the height of this, do something like that. Now this guy looks a little bit too low poly to me right here. So maybe let's go to geometry. Let's do a crease. I'm going to press crease one time, then hold down Control and D and just subdivide this a bunch of times until it kind of smooths out a little bit, right? Very nice. If we wanted to, another thing we could do is grab one of these orb brushes. Now, if you don't have these orb brushes, I strongly suggest you grab them. I actually included a link to these in my community, but you can also just Google orb, free orb zBrush brushes, and these are amazing for stylized sculpting. So, you know, if I grab something like this one, I can just create like a little indentation there, right? So it looks a little bit more stylized. I can grab another one and do something like that. Now, if I don't have enough resolution, of course, I can subdivide my plate even more. You can have fun, you know, beating this up, right? But I guess that's the idea, right? What else can we do? If we wanted to add maybe a little, maybe this is like an old candle plate, and maybe you want to do like a little thing that allows you to hold this. So to do that, let's do something like, let's see, let's append a, we'll just append a box, right? Let's move the box out and maybe make it, so I'm creating kind of a handle on the fly, just kind of having fun here. But let's create a handle that maybe, I don't know, goes something like this. And let's make sure that it's straight. For some reason it's not straight. All right, so it's straight. I need to jump out of the perspective mode to make this straight. How about like that? Go this way. I think this is great. Now to make this handle maybe a little more interesting, we could bend it, right? So let's go ahead and just maybe make it a little bit longer. All right, so we could bend this, but before we bend it, we're definitely gonna need more resolution. So let's maybe turn this into a Dynamesh piece. That'll give us a lot of resolution, which is great. Now if we go to settings, we can go to bend curve. We can adjust how many points we want. So maybe initially, let's just do something like this. Maybe this one goes down, this one comes up. And maybe this one kind of bends down. So I'm essentially creating kind of an ancient looking handle. We can twist this, which is great. We can also twist this one. Maybe let's grab this and squeeze it. We can make it maybe a little skinnier. Just to add a little more, you know, just something interesting. All right, once you're done, go back into settings and just say accept. And let's take a look and see what we got. So here we go. We have something along these lines. Again, we can beat this up as well using our orb brushes. Let's just beat this up. Now here's a really cool trick. If you wanted to add something and you do something like this, but then you decided, hey, I want it to be a little deeper. If you don't move your camera and just press 1 on your keyboard, it will double up. And then you can smooth it out or do whatever you want, but that's a really cool little trick. So maybe we need a little more resolution. Let's see how much we got. So that should work, right? So now, if I do, let's see something like this, you can see that I did that. And now if I don't move anything, just press 1, you can see how it's like making it deeper, right? A really cool trick. All right, so I think I'll stop here, but let's jump into perspective view, take a look. So there we go. So we have kind of a stylized candle created here in ZBrush. So thank you for watching this. I hope you found this fun and useful, and I'll see you in the next one. Definitely not loving this part here. There you go. There we go, that's a little better.